My name is Clara, and I'm 35 years old. That stormy night my husband abandoned me on a desolate road was the final act in a 3-year play of escalating control. As I stood there, drenched to the bone 30 miles from my home, I couldn't have imagined that this would be my moment of liberation. When he sped off, leaving me stranded to teach me a lesson, he made his last mistake. He had no idea what was about to happen, but before I tell you how I ended up soaked in a downpour 30 miles from home, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. If this story strikes a chord with you, subscribe to join our community of survivors who have transformed their pain into power. I had always been driven by my career. By my early 30s, I'd climbed the ladder to become a marketing executive at Apex Innovations, one of Denver's most dynamic software companies. My life was a whirlwind of strategy meetings, creative brainstorming, and the deep satisfaction of watching my campaigns launch and succeed. I cherished my job and the independence it afforded me. I met Julian at an industry conference in Aspen. I was on stage, presenting our latest campaign data, and he found me afterward. He didn't just offer empty praise. His questions were sharp, insightful, showing a genuine curiosity about my work. With his easy confidence and focused gaze, he was a world apart from the opportunistic networkers I usually met at these events. "Your presentation was stunning," he said. "The way you merged emotional narrative with hard analytics is precisely what my company is missing." Julian was a marketing director at a rival firm, a few years older than me, with a polished air that hinted at a life of privilege and success. He invited me for coffee, which stretched into dinner, which then became the most captivating conversation I'd had in years. Our romance was a blur. Within a few weeks, we were inseparable. We spent every weekend together, either at my apartment in Denver or his sleek condo overlooking the mountains. He would surprise me with deliveries of my favorite takeout during my busiest weeks at work, or send me links to articles that were relevant to my current projects. He seemed to grasp the intense demands of my career perfectly. "I love how passionate you are about your work," he'd murmur, massaging my shoulders after a grueling day. "We're going to be an unstoppable team." Looking back, the warning signs were there. Subtle flags I chose to ignore. The way he would casually pick up my phone when it buzzed with a notification, how he'd probe for details about why a certain meeting ran late. The almost imperceptible tension in his voice when I mentioned a male colleague by name. "Just looking out for you," he'd say whenever I challenged him on it. "This industry is full of sharks." I would later learn that Julian came from a family with considerable wealth. His father owned a massive real estate empire spanning several states, and Julian had grown up accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted. His parents had sky-high expectations and zero tolerance for failure, which had molded him into a man obsessed with presenting a flawless facade while hiding deep-seated insecurities. After 8 months of dating, he proposed during a surprise getaway to Vail. The ring was breathtaking, the setting idyllic. I said yes, without a flicker of doubt, convinced I had found a true partner who valued my ambition as much as his own. Our wedding was a grand production at one of Denver's most exclusive venues, with over 200 guests, custom everything, and a honeymoon booked for the Maldives. I was so swept up in the fairy tale that I barely noticed how Julian had quietly taken over most of the wedding planning, gently steering my choices toward his better options. The change after we were married was insidious. At first, Julian would call multiple times during my workday just to check in. Then he suggested I share my work calendar with him so we could coordinate our lives better. When I'd talk excitedly about a new project, he'd furrow his brow. "You're already so swamped, Clara. Are you sure you want to take on more?" It was around this time that I first met Owen. Our company hired him as the new head of corporate security following a minor data breach. He was tall, reserved, and intensely professional, and he immediately began overhauling the security protocols throughout the building. During our initial meeting, he barely cracked a smile, his focus entirely on explaining the new security measures my team needed to adopt. "Your department handles sensitive product information," he stated, his tone all business. "You'll need to be especially vigilant." I remember thinking how starkly different he was from Julian. Where my husband was all charm and expressive gestures, Owen was steady and economical with his words. I had no idea then how pivotal he would become in my life. The first major fight with Julian happened about 6 months into our marriage. I had to miss a dinner with his important clients because of a server crash that threatened our entire company website. I stayed with our IT team until 10 p.m., working to fix the crisis. When I finally walked through the door of our home, Julian was waiting for me in the dark living room, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "You embarrassed me tonight," he said, his voice quiet and cold. Carl Baker could have transformed our business connections. "I texted you about the emergency," I replied, exhausted. "The entire campaign would have been lost if we hadn't fixed it." "Your priorities seem very clear," he retorted, brushing past me and heading to the guest bedroom. The next morning, he apologized with a bouquet of my favorite flowers and breakfast in bed. I overreacted. "I just missed you and wanted to show you off." The apology felt wonderful, but it unknowingly established a dangerous pattern. Julian would cross a line, withdraw his affection when I displeased him, and then win me back with a grand gesture. With each cycle, his monitoring of my schedule and my communications intensified. I started making excuses for him in my own mind. He wasn't controlling, he was just protective. He wasn't jealous, he was just devoted. I was the lucky one. To have a husband who cared so deeply. I was so wrong. As my career continued to ascend, Julian's dissatisfaction with my work hours and success became more pronounced. What had once felt like supportive interest curdled into constant scrutiny. He would text me incessantly throughout the day, demanding immediate replies, and interrogate me about why certain meetings took so long. "I just worry about you burning yourself out," he'd say whenever I expressed my frustration. "Someone has to look after your well-being." 6 months into our marriage, Julian asked for access to my work email to help manage your schedule better. When I refused, explaining it was against company policy, he gave me the silent treatment for days, peppering our few conversations with comments about secrets and the need for transparency in a marriage. The Apex Innovations Christmas party was a major turning point. My team had just secured the Vanguard account, a massive win we had chased for months. Our CEO, Mr. Hayes, was praising my strategy in front of the entire executive team when Julian cut in. "Claire has been working far too hard on this," he said, wrapping his arm around my waist, his grip uncomfortably tight. "I barely see my wife anymore. Mr. Hayes, you need to give her a break before I'm forced to steal her away completely." The awkward hush that fell over the group was agonizing. Mr. Hayes managed a tight-lipped smile and moved on, but the damage was done. I had been publicly undermined in front of every person who mattered to my career. In the car on the way home, I confronted him. "You embarrassed me in front of my entire company." "I was just joking," he shot back dismissively. Everyone knew it was a joke. They thought it was charming. "You're being way too sensitive." 2 weeks later, I was offered the promotion to Vice President of Marketing. Instead of celebrating with me, Julian questioned if I had the time for such a demanding role and suggested I should be thinking about our future family plans before accepting. When I pointed out that he'd never mentioned wanting children so soon, he accused me of changing the fundamental agreement of our marriage. I accepted the promotion anyway. That night, Julian didn't come home until well after midnight, claiming he needed space to think about our priorities. He then began to subtly poison my relationships with my friends and family. My college best friend, Jenna, was too negative. My sister, Olivia, was a bad influence with all her talk about her recent divorce. My mother, Rose, called far too often. Each criticism was followed by a suggestion to limit contact. "I'm just trying to protect our marriage from outside negativity," he would claim. Financial control was the next frontier. Despite my very substantial salary, Julian insisted we merge our finances into joint accounts that he primarily managed. He started questioning every one of my purchases, from a new blazer for work to birthday gifts for my team members. "Do you really need another one of those?" he'd ask. "That coffee shop shows up on our statement 3 times this week." Then came the dinner party incident. We were hosting his business partners at our home. I shared an amusing anecdote about a client, and the table erupted in laughter. Everyone except Julian, who leveled me with an icy stare. "Clara has a habit of interrupting more important conversations," he announced to our guests. "She gets a little overexcited and forgets her manners sometimes." The room fell dead silent. His friend Victor looked down at his plate, while his wife shot me a look of pure sympathy. I excused myself to the kitchen, fighting back tears as I plated the dessert. Around this time, Owen, the security director, rolled out new protocols that required all executive staff to have personal safety consultations. During our private meeting, he was professionally detached, but incredibly thorough. "Executive positions can sometimes attract unwanted attention," he explained. "We need to go over how you protect your personal information and physical safety." I found myself sharing more than was strictly necessary about my home life. Something about Owen's calm, steady presence made it easy to talk. He listened without judgment, only asking clarifying questions about my personal security habits. "Your safety extends beyond this building, Clara," he said as I was leaving. "Remember that." The situation with Julian spiraled when he found text messages from male colleagues on my phone. One evening, I came out of the shower to find him scrolling through my conversations. "Who is Thomas? Why is he texting you at 9 at night about a presentation?" His voice was chillingly calm. "He's the new product manager. We have a joint presentation tomorrow," I explained, feeling a profound sense of violation. "You should have told me," he said, tossing my phone onto the bed. "No more secrets." The very next day, Julian had a GPS tracker installed in my car, citing safety reasons. He started texting me whenever I deviated from my normal route home, calling if I wasn't in the door at the exact time he expected. "I worry when you're late," he would say. "Is it so wrong for a husband to care about his wife's whereabouts?" We had planned a weekend trip to Boulder for our anniversary. I'd packed my bags the night before, thrilled at the prospect of a break from the suffocating tension at home. When I came downstairs in the morning, Julian was unpacking my suitcase. "The trip's off," he announced, holding up a cocktail dress I had packed. "If you planned on wearing this, your intentions for this trip clearly weren't about us." "That's for the dinner reservation you made," I said, baffled. "I didn't approve this dress," he said, gesturing to my carefully chosen outfits. "We'll go when you can learn to prioritize our marriage properly." As I watched him systematically dismantle my belongings, a cold realization settled in my stomach. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong with my marriage. The man I had fallen in love with had been replaced by a person I was beginning to fear. The situation took an even darker turn when my mother fell ill with pneumonia. She lived in Boulder, just a short drive away, but when I told Julian I needed to go see her, his response was cold and calculated. "Your mother has always been a bit dramatic about her health," he said dismissively. "Let your sister handle it this time." "We have the Sterling account presentation this week." When I insisted, he relented, but with strict conditions. I could only stay for one night, and I had to call him every 2 hours to check in. During my short visit, his texts were relentless. He eventually called her hospital room directly when I missed one of his check-ins by 10 minutes. "I was speaking with her doctor," I whispered into the phone. "You agreed to our communication terms," he replied coldly. After I returned from Boulder, I found myself in a constant state of anxiety. I was walking on eggshells in my own home, second-guessing every word and every decision. That's when I reached out to Owen at work, asking if he could meet me for coffee to discuss additional security protocols. We met at a small cafe a few blocks from the office. Owen listened intently as I vaguely described my concerns about privacy and security at home. Though I never mentioned Julian by name, Owen seemed to grasp the subtext. "Sometimes security threats come from the sources we least expect," he said carefully. "As a security professional, I can offer consultation services outside of work hours if it's ever needed." He handed me his personal business card with a handwritten number on the back. "This line is secure and private." I slipped the card into my wallet, feeling a mix of reassurance and terror that I might actually need it. That evening, Julian found the receipt from the cafe in my purse. "Coffee with Owen Matthews," he read, his voice dangerously low, "our company's security director." "Are you having an affair, Clara?" It was a work meeting about new security protocols, I explained, my voice trembling slightly. "At a cafe? Not his office? Do you take me for an idiot?" He threw the receipt at me. "No more private meetings with men. Period." The argument escalated until Julian slammed my laptop shut with so much force the screen cracked. "Oops," he said with a chilling smile. "Looks like you'll have to work from home tomorrow where I can keep an eye on you." That night, after he fell asleep, I started documenting everything. I created a password-protected file on my work computer, logging dates, times, and detailed descriptions of his controlling behavior. I also began secretly recording our arguments, using an app Owen had recommended for documenting security incidents. Following Owen's professional advice, I set up emergency contacts and protocols. I bought a second cheap phone that I kept hidden in my desk drawer at work, programmed with essential numbers, and the rideshare apps Julian had deleted from my main phone to save money. Julian's verbal abuse grew more intense. When I questioned his decision to cancel one of my credit cards without telling me, he launched into a furious tirade. "You're becoming unhinged," he shouted. "I'm trying to protect our financial future from your reckless spending, and you treat me like a criminal. Maybe if you focused more on being a good wife instead of a corporate drone, I wouldn't have to make these decisions for you." I suggested marriage counseling, clinging to the hope that a professional could help him see his behavior. He initially refused, calling it outsider interference, but finally agreed after I broke down completely. We attended exactly 2 sessions before Julian declared the therapist biased and unqualified after she gently questioned his need for control. "She obviously has an agenda against traditional marriages," he fumed on the drive home. "I'm not going back there to be vilified." My work became my only sanctuary, but even that was under siege. A major product launch required late nights from my entire team. Julian started showing up at the office unannounced, bringing food under the guise of making sure you're eating, but really to survey who I was working with. The situation reached its breaking point when I discovered spyware on my phone that was forwarding all my messages to Julian and tracking my location in real time. I only found it because Owen had implemented a company-wide digital security training that included how to check personal devices for unauthorized apps. "This is serious, Clara," Owen said when I showed him the app in private. "This type of surveillance isn't just invasive, it's potentially illegal." He helped me secure a new phone through the company's executive security program and showed me how to lock down my digital privacy. More importantly, he helped me create a safety plan. "If you ever feel unsafe, you need immediate options," he explained, showing me how to program emergency contacts with a single button activation. When I confronted Julian about the spyware, he twisted it back on me with terrifying skill. "I installed it because I suspected you were cheating," he said calmly, and clearly I was right. "Why else would you be so secretive with your security boyfriend?" "Owen is a colleague helping with company-mandated security protocols," I insisted. "Lie to yourself if you want, but don't lie to me," Julian responded, his voice a mask of terrifying calm. That night, I brought up the idea of separation for the first time. The rage in his eyes made me take an involuntary step back, but it quickly morphed into tears. "I'm under so much pressure at work," he sobbed. "My father is threatening to cut me out of the business if we don't hit our quarterly targets. I know I've been difficult, but I can't lose you, too. Please, I'll change. I'll get help. Against my better judgment and against Owen's implicit professional advice, I agreed to give him one more chance. It was a decision I would regret almost immediately. 3 weeks after Julian's tearful promises, nothing had changed but his tactics. Instead of overt control, he now used guilt and manipulation. Whenever I voiced a concern, he would remind me of his vulnerability in sharing his work stress, making me feel cruel for attacking him during such a difficult time. The incident that finally shattered our marriage started with a dinner for a massive potential client, Maxwell Sterling. Julian had insisted on attending, despite my reservations. "As your husband, I should be there to support you," he'd said, though his tone felt more like surveillance than support. The dinner began well enough at Denver's most exclusive steakhouse. Maxwell brought his wife, Stephanie, and for the first hour, Julian was charm itself. But as the evening wore on and the business talk deepened, Julian began to interject more and more. "Clara tends to overcomplicate these strategies," he said after I had outlined our proposed marketing approach. "The simpler solution would be..." When Maxwell asked about our international capabilities, Julian answered before I could, providing outdated information that I had to gently correct. "My husband is thinking of our previous model," I said with a diplomatic smile. "Our current global strategy has evolved significantly." I could feel Julian's anger simmering beside me. When dessert arrived, he placed his hand on my thigh under the table and squeezed, painfully hard, all while maintaining a pleasant smile for our guests. I knew what that meant. I was in trouble. The drive home began in a thick, tense silence. We were heading east on the highway, the route taking us through progressively more remote areas as we neared our home in the foothills. A light rain had started to fall, quickly becoming a torrential downpour that mirrored the storm brewing inside the car. "You contradicted me 5 times, Julian finally said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "I had to provide accurate information," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Maxwell is considering a 7-figure contract." "You made me look like an idiot," he seethed, accelerating dangerously on the slick road. "Is that your goal now?" "To humiliate me at every turn." My phone rang. The screen showed it was Owen. Under normal circumstances, I would have let it go to voicemail, but our company was in the middle of a security alert after a suspected breach attempt. "I need to take this. It could be about the security alert from this afternoon," I said, answering before Julian could object. "Clara, we've confirmed unauthorized access attempts on the marketing server," Owen said, his voice all business. "We need to verify you haven't shared your credentials with anyone, even family members." I could feel Julian's eyes on me, his ears straining to hear every word. "No, I have not shared my login information with anyone," I replied, keeping my tone professional. "Is someone with you right now?" Owen asked, his security training obviously picking up on the tension in my voice. "That is correct," I answered carefully. "Are you in a safe situation to talk?" "No, not at the moment." There was a short pause on the line. "Understood. Please call the security desk when you can speak freely. This is a priority 2 alert." As I hung up, Julian swerved the car violently onto the shoulder, the tires screaming on the wet asphalt. "That was him, wasn't it? Your security boyfriend checking in?" His voice had a dangerous edge I'd never heard before. It was about a security breach at work. "We have sensitive client data." "Stop lying!" he screamed, slamming his fist on the dashboard. "I saw the way he looked at you at the company picnic. I'm not blind." He pulled back onto the highway, driving even faster now, the windshield wipers battling a losing fight against the deluge. "You've been undermining me for months," he raged, his words spilling out in a torrent, "making me look incompetent, spending nights at the office, all these secretive phone calls. Do you think I'm a complete idiot?" The rain was a solid sheet now, making the road ahead nearly invisible. We were on a rural highway surrounded by dark forest, at least 30 miles from the city. No streetlights, no other cars, just darkness and the roar of the storm. Julian suddenly slammed on the brakes, skidding onto a gravel turnout barely visible in the tempest. The jolt threw me hard against my seatbelt. "This ends now," he said, turning to face me, his eyes wild. "You are going to quit your job. You are going to cut all contact with Owen, and you are going to recommit to this marriage on my terms." I looked at my husband and saw him clearly, maybe for the very first time. The charming man I married was gone, if he had ever really existed at all. In his place was a stranger consumed by insecurity and a desperate need for control. "No," I said simply. The single word hung in the air between us. Julian looked genuinely shocked, as if the possibility of my refusal had never once entered his mind. "What did you just say?" His voice was a deadly whisper. I said no. I am not quitting my job. I am not cutting contact with my colleagues. And I am not continuing in a marriage built on fear and control. His face twisted into a mask of pure rage. "Get out!" "What?" "Get out of the car. Now." He reached across me and threw my door open, rain immediately lashing the interior. "Julian, we are in the middle of nowhere. It's pouring. You need to learn a lesson about respect and about who is in charge here. Get out, or I will drag you out." I believed him. The look in his eyes told me he was more than capable of it. I unbuckled my seatbelt and stepped out into the raging storm. In seconds, I was soaked through, my hair plastered to my face, my business suit clinging to my skin. Julian leaned across the passenger seat. "Start walking. Maybe the 30 miles home will give you some time to reconsider your priorities and your attitude." He slammed my door shut and sped away, his taillights vanishing into the black, rainy night. I stood there, water streaming down my face, and felt a strange, profound calm. This was it. The moment of absolute clarity. There was no going back, no more second chances, no more benefit of the doubt. In abandoning me here, Julian had finally freed me from any lingering guilt or obligation. The rain continued to fall as I reached into my bra, where I had hidden my secondary phone. Just as Owen had advised, always have a means of communication that can't be easily taken. With trembling, wet fingers, I pressed the emergency contact button we had programmed. It rang only twice before Owen answered. "Clara? Are you okay?" "Julian left me on Highway 36, about 30 miles east of the city," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I need help." "Are you injured?" "No, just soaked and stranded." "I have your location from the signal. Stay exactly where you are. I'm 15 minutes out." I stood in the darkness, the relentless rain washing away the last 3 years of fear. A few minutes later, headlights cut through the storm. Owen's black truck pulled up, and he was out in an instant, unfazed by the downpour. "I brought dry clothes, water, and a thermos of hot coffee," he said, as if rescuing stranded executives was just part of his job description. "Are you certain you're not hurt?" I looked up at him. This man who had been nothing but professional and respectful, who had prepared for this very emergency without ever making me feel weak for needing his help. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I smiled. A real, genuine smile. "I'm okay now," I said. As we walked toward his truck, my primary phone buzzed with a string of texts from Julian. "Have you learned your lesson yet? Are you ready to apologize? Where are you? Answer me." I powered the phone off and climbed into the warm, dry safety of Owen's truck, knowing with absolute certainty that Julian had just made the last mistake of his life. Owen drove with a steady hand through the storm, the windshield wipers keeping a rhythmic beat against my racing thoughts. I had changed into the emergency clothes he kept in his truck, a simple sweatsuit with the Apex logo, several sizes too big but wonderfully dry and warm. "I'm not taking you home," Owen said, breaking the silence. "Based on standard security protocols for this type of situation, we need to secure you at a neutral location first." I nodded. the logic cutting through my emotional fog. Going back to the house I shared with Julian would be incredibly dangerous. I have a corporate account at the Grand Hotel downtown, he continued. Security is excellent. All entries are monitored, and they have a strict no-disclosure policy for guests. It's standard procedure. His professional detachment was a bomb. This wasn't personal for him. It was a security situation he was trained to manage. There was no pity in his gaze, only competence. My phone, which I'd turned back on, had been buzzing nonstop. When I finally glanced at it at a stoplight, I had 27 missed calls and 46 texts from Julian, their tone shifting from annoyance to rage and finally to panic. "Where are you? This isn't funny. I'm driving back to find you. Answer me. If you called someone for a ride, you will regret it. I'm coming home. You better be there." Owen glanced at the screen. "You should document all of this. It will be important later." At the hotel, Owen checked me in under the corporate account, escorted me to my room, and performed what he called a standard security sweep. He then took up a position in the hallway outside my door. "I'll remain on site to ensure there are no security breaches," he explained. "Please use the hotel phone if you need anything. My team is monitoring your husband's location via his vehicle's GPS as part of our potential threat assessment." I was struck by how he maintained such absolute professionalism while providing the precise protection I needed. There was no emotional messiness, no attempt to take advantage of my vulnerability, just clear boundaries and unwavering expertise. That night, alone in the quiet, secure hotel room, I made two decisions. I would file for divorce immediately, and I would get a restraining order. The next morning, Owen connected me with Sarah, a lawyer specializing in domestic abuse cases who had a consulting relationship with our company. She arrived at the hotel with paperwork already in hand. Based on what Owen briefed me on, we have solid grounds for both an emergency divorce filing and a temporary restraining order, she explained efficiently. The abandonment incident alone qualifies as endangerment, but from what I understand, there's a much deeper history. I spent the next 3 hours recounting every incident of control, monitoring, isolation, and verbal abuse. Sarah recorded everything, her professional demeanor a mirror of Owen's, which helped me stay focused. "We'll need to retrieve your essential documents and personal items," Sarah said when I finished. "Do you feel comfortable returning to the house with a full security detail?" The thought of seeing Julian again sent a chill down my spine. But I needed my passport, birth certificate, and irreplaceable family photos. "I'll handle it," Owen stated. "We can send a security team during business hours tomorrow when your husband is scheduled to be at work." Owen personally led the retrieval operation. What they found shocked even him. He discovered hidden cameras planted throughout our house, including one in the master bathroom. Spyware had been installed on every digital device we owned. My personal documents were locked in a safe I never knew existed. This level of premeditated surveillance indicates a significant escalation beyond what you initially described, Owen noted, as his team documented everything with photographs. It substantially strengthens your case for the restraining order. Meanwhile, Julian had figured out I wasn't coming home. He attempted to freeze our joint accounts, but thanks to Sarah's foresight, I had already transferred my portion of our liquid savings to a new private account the previous afternoon. What he didn't know was that I had maintained a separate emergency account all along, a step I'd taken months ago based on Owen's security advice about maintaining independent financial resources as a basic safety protocol. The confrontation came when Julian stormed into the lobby of my office building, demanding to see me. Security had been fully briefed and intercepted him immediately. "Sir, you are not authorized to access this floor," the guard informed him politely. "My wife works here." "I need to speak with her now," Julian insisted, his voice echoing across the marble lobby. "I'm sorry, but we cannot allow you access without clearance," the guard replied calmly. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Julian shouted, now creating a full-blown scene. "Call Clara right now." I watched the entire event on the security feed from my office, with Owen standing silently beside me. This is standard behavior for individuals with controlling patterns when they feel their control slipping, he commented dispassionately. The documentation continues. Julian was eventually escorted from the building, yelling threats and accusations. The entire incident was captured on high-definition video. In court, the evidence was overwhelming. The GPS data from my abandonment, the photos of the hidden cameras, the log of his threatening texts, and the video of his outburst at my office painted an undeniable picture. Julian's lawyer tried to portray him as a concerned husband, worried about his unstable wife. But the judge was not swayed. Her expression was resolute as she looked up from the file. Based on the preponderance of evidence, this court grants the temporary restraining order for a period of 90 days, she declared. The respondent is to remain at least 500 feet from the petitioner's person, residence, and place of employment. Furthermore, all surveillance equipment is to be removed from the marital home within 24 hours, supervised by court-appointed personnel. Julian's face went from shock to pure fury. He had genuinely believed his performance as the worried husband would work. As we left the courtroom, he called out, "This is not over, Clara. You have no idea what you've just done." Two court officers stepped between us as Owen efficiently ushered me toward a waiting car. News of our separation ripped through our social and professional circles. Julian launched a vicious smear campaign, telling mutual friends that I was having an affair with Owen, that I had become emotionally unstable due to work stress, and that I had abandoned our marriage without any warning. Some believed him, but others, especially women who had witnessed his subtle digs and controlling behavior at social events, reached out with messages of support. I moved into a secure apartment in a building where several Apex executives lived, a place with comprehensive security and restricted access. The company covered the cost as part of their executive protection program. That first night in my new, safe apartment, with secure locks and the knowledge that Julian couldn't get to me, I slept soundly for the first time in years. The rain that had soaked me on that highway had washed away the last vestiges of my fear and doubt. I was finally, truly free. Returning to work with the immense weight of Julian's control lifted felt like taking my first deep breath after years in a suffocating room. My team had only been told I was dealing with a personal security situation, but their support was palpable in small, unspoken gestures. A coffee left silently on my desk, or quiet offers to handle evening presentations so I could leave before dark. Owen had implemented even tighter security protocols. My office access now required biometric verification, and security personnel discreetly monitored the lobby and parking garage. These measures were framed as general building upgrades, preserving my privacy while guaranteeing my safety. Julian, however, was not one to give up. He violated the restraining order 3 times in the first month. First, by sending a massive bouquet of flowers to my office with a card that read, "I forgive you. Come home." Then, by appearing at the coffee shop directly across from our building, staring at me through the window until security was called to intervene. The final violation was when he was found waiting in the parking garage, an incident a security officer spotted on camera. Each violation was meticulously documented, photographed, and reported to the police and to Sarah, our attorney. "This pattern is textbook," Sarah said during one of our weekly calls. "Abusers often escalate when they lose control. Each violation strengthens our case and makes a permanent order more likely. We are building an irrefutable record." Owen continued to provide professional security support, maintaining impeccable boundaries despite Julian's wild accusations of an affair. He never once commented on the personal aspects of my situation, keeping his focus squarely on security protocols and threat assessment. "Your ex-husband's behavior fits established patterns," he would state, reviewing the latest incident report. "We can anticipate and mitigate his next moves based on known escalation trajectories." His matter-of-fact approach helped me separate my emotions from our strategy, a distinction that proved invaluable in the following months. Gradually, I began to reconnect with the friends Julian had systematically isolated me from. My college roommate Jenna flew in from Chicago for a weekend, completely horrified by the story I shared. "I knew something was wrong when you stopped calling," she said over dinner at my new apartment. "You used to tell me everything, and then suddenly your texts became so short and formal. I should have pushed harder." "He had me convinced you were a negative influence," I admitted. "He would check my phone after we spoke and critique everything you said." Reconnecting with my sister Olivia was equally healing. She had divorced her own controlling husband 2 years prior, which explained why Julian had been so determined to keep us apart. "He recognized me as a threat," she said, nodding, when I explained his tactics. "I would have seen right through his act." The most emotional reunion was with my mother. I learned that her pneumonia had worsened significantly after my brief, tense visit, requiring a long hospital stay. I later discovered that Julian had been intercepting messages from my sister about her deteriorating condition, telling me she was fine to shield me from unnecessary stress, but in reality, preventing me from being with her. When I was finally able to visit her in Boulder, spending a full week at her home with a discreet security detail stationed outside, she just held me and cried. "I knew something was wrong, Clara," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You sounded so different on the phone, so careful. Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried, sweetheart," she whispered. 3 times. I tried to ask you if you were okay, and each time you defended him so fiercely, I became terrified of pushing you away completely. That's what these men do. They isolate you and turn you into their defender against everyone who loves you." As the divorce proceedings moved forward, more of Julian's financial misconduct was unearthed. He hadn't just diverted a small inheritance I'd received, but had also taken out loans in my name and maxed out credit cards I didn't even know existed. Sarah's forensic accounting team found evidence that he had done similar things to a previous girlfriend, though they had never married. "Financial abuse leaves a clear paper trail," Sarah explained. "It's often the most concrete evidence we can present in court." Julian's parents attempted to intervene, inviting me to lunch to discuss reconciliation. I declined through Sarah, maintaining the firm boundaries the restraining order provided. They then showed up at my office, only to be politely turned away by security. "Your husband made some mistakes, but destroying a marriage is an overreaction," his mother, Barbara, said in a voicemail she left. "All couples have problems. Running to lawyers instead of working things out shows a deep immaturity." I deleted the message without a second thought, newly confident in my choices. The guilt that Julian had so carefully cultivated had finally withered and died. The most unexpected validation came from Julian's ex-girlfriend, Megan, who reached out through Sarah after hearing about our divorce. "I lived through 2 years of what you're describing," she wrote in an email. "The monitoring, the criticism, the isolation. When I finally left, he stalked me for months. I wish I had pressed charges instead of just disappearing. You are doing the right thing by creating an official record." Her words were a powerful antidote to the narrative Julian was trying to spin, that I was unstable and overreacting. I began therapy with Dr. Eleanor Vance, a specialist in recovery from coercive control. Our weekly sessions helped me understand how gradually the control had escalated and how Julian had expertly exploited my natural tendency to see the best in people. "Coercive control works incrementally," she explained. "Small boundary violations that seem insignificant in isolation build a pattern of dominance over time. Your strength is that you recognized it and acted before it progressed to physical violence." Despite Julian's attempts at intimidation, I refused to shrink. When our biggest client, Hamilton Industries, requested an in-person presentation for their board, Julian somehow found out and contacted their marketing director, suggesting I was emotionally unstable and offering to step in himself. The director, a sharp woman named Deborah, called me directly. "Your ex-husband reached out with some concerning claims," she said bluntly. "I wanted to hear your side before making any decisions." I told her the truth, honestly and without melodrama. Deborah listened, then responded with unwavering support. "My own sister went through something very similar," she said. "We will increase security for the presentation and ensure he cannot access the building. The board is looking forward to your insights, not his." That presentation was a defining moment. Knowing Julian had tried to sabotage me, I delivered the most confident, powerful pitch of my career. Hamilton Industries doubled their contract, and I was photographed with their CEO for the company newsletter. The article, which highlighted the innovative campaign my team developed, was shared across the industry. It was the first time in years I had appeared in a public, professional capacity, without Julian's shadow looming over me, and the sense of liberation was intoxicating. Slowly, I began to reclaim the interests and passions Julian had dismissed as frivolous. I joined a hiking group, reconnected with my love for photography, and even took sailing lessons. Each new activity was a piece of myself I was taking back. When Christmas came, I spent it quietly with my mother, cooking and watching old movies. "You're yourself again," she said, watching me laugh freely at a silly holiday film. "I can see it in your eyes." I realized she was right. The constant heavy weight of vigilance was gone. I was rediscovering joy without fear of judgment. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time since that rainy night on the highway, I felt completely certain that leaving Julian was not just necessary, it was life-saving. 1 year after the night Julian left me in the rain, I stood at the window of my new apartment, watching another storm roll across the Denver skyline. The parallel was not lost on me. The rain that had once symbolized the lowest point of my life now felt like a cleansing, a renewal. The divorce had been finalized 3 months prior. Despite Julian's desperate attempts to drag out the proceedings, Sarah's meticulous documentation and the undeniable evidence of his financial and psychological abuse resulted in a settlement that was a resounding victory. I recovered my stolen inheritance, plus compensation for the fraudulent loans. But more valuable than any financial sum was the devastating impact the public court records had on Julian's carefully crafted image. The charming, successful businessman was exposed as a manipulative, controlling abuser. Several of his major clients cut ties, and his father finally stepped in, removing him from all leadership positions in the family business and making therapy a condition of his continued employment. My own professional life had blossomed. 2 months after the divorce was final, I was promoted to Chief Marketing Officer, the youngest in Apex Innovations history. This promotion recognizes not just your exceptional marketing vision, but your remarkable resilience and integrity, Mr. Hayes said when he offered me the position. The way you handled a profound personal challenge while maintaining absolute professionalism speaks volumes about your character. And in my new role, I established a workplace support program for employees experiencing domestic abuse, partnering with local organizations to provide confidential resources, security protocols, and emergency housing. The first time an employee used the program to safely leave an abusive partner, I knew my painful journey had created something meaningful, a silver lining I had never anticipated. My relationship with Owen had settled into a warm, respectful friendship. He remained head of corporate security, and we often collaborated on expanding the company's safety initiatives. Contrary to Julian's accusations, our connection had never once crossed a professional line. Security professionals maintain clear ethical standards. Owen had explained matter-of-factly when I finally asked him about it. My only role was to ensure your safety. I began speaking at business conferences about recognizing coercive control in professional settings, helping other executives identify the warning signs. After one such conference, a senior executive from a competing firm approached me. "You just described my daughter's marriage," she said quietly, her eyes filled with a new understanding. "Thank you for giving me the vocabulary and the resources to help her." Therapy with Dr. Eleanor continued, shifting from crisis management to deeper healing. We explored the patterns that had made me vulnerable to Julian's manipulation and worked on building stronger internal boundaries. "You are not responsible for what happened," she would often remind me, "but understanding your own vulnerabilities is what gives you the power to protect yourself in the future." 9 months after the divorce, I saw Julian unexpectedly. I was at a downtown restaurant with colleagues, celebrating a successful launch, when he walked in. He looked smaller somehow, his confident swagger gone. Our eyes met briefly. I felt a fleeting tightness in my chest, an echo of old fear, but it vanished as quickly as it came. What surprised me was the emotion that followed, a strange, detached pity, not for him, but for the deeply insecure person who needed to crush others to feel powerful. I turned back to my friends, to our laughter and celebration, and didn't give him another thought. He saw me leave later, but made no move. His power over me was completely broken. I learned to trust my gut again, recognizing that the unease I'd felt so early in my relationship with Julian had been my intuition screaming at me to run. I learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish, but an essential act of self-preservation. And most importantly, I learned that vulnerability isn't weakness. Sharing my story, first in sterile offices, and then with trusted friends, and finally through advocacy, transformed my shame into purpose. One evening, sitting on my balcony watching the sunset, I realized I had found peace. Not because my life was perfect, but because it was finally, authentically mine. The woman Julian had tried to erase had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. What he had intended as a punishment had become my ultimate liberation. As I share this with you, I wonder how many of you have had a similar moment of terrible clarity, when the truth of a relationship becomes impossible to ignore. If my journey resonates with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story matters. If this helped you recognize patterns in your own life or in someone else's, please subscribe to our channel for more stories of survival and transformation. Every like and share helps these narratives reach someone who might need to hear them most. Remember, the moment you finally choose yourself is the moment everything can begin to change. Thank you for listening. May you find the courage to honor your own truth, whatever that may be. End of story.